We'll begin with a presentation by Nikil Mukerji, who's a philosopher and someone who's worked on, what's it, trolleyology. And he's also on the scientific council of the German skeptics organization, GWUP. And he'll be talking about fake news more in general, but also bring the first connection to AI, and then we'll delve a bit deeper into AI with David Goodman later on. So starting off with Nikil, the floor is yours.
Yeah, what is fake news? That's my topic for today, and this is the agenda. First of all, I'm going to start off with the question, why would you invite a philosopher to give a talk about this topic, or a philosopher in general? Then I'm going to make some claims about fake news. Then I'm going to ask, what can we as skeptics do? And draw a few conclusions from that in the way of a summary. Okay. I'd be interested to know who in this room has philosophical training. With a show of hands. Interesting. Yeah. And these are not enough people to have an actual poll as to the question what the most important philosophical skill is. To be prepared, I brought in my friend. I actually prompted Socrates, show me Socrates thinking about this tough issue, but it looks more like Aristotle, I think. That said, okay, thinking is in progress. You might as well think about it as well, too. Turns out you need a system update, because only in German could you say, this is the answer to the question. Inkompetenz, Kompensationskompetenz. So what does that mean? On the one hand, it's good to wake you up from your midday slumber, but there's actually an easy way to solve what this means. Just start at the end. So apparently it's a competence, which is good. Yeah. What is it a competence to do? To compensate for something, namely your own incompetence. So this is what philosophers are trained to do, and I'm just letting you know. This is also why we say doing philosophy has pros and cons. I've picked the two most important ones on each side, and well, on the con side, turns out as a philosopher, nobody takes you seriously when you say something. Yeah? That's a bit of a nuisance, but turns out philosophy also has something on the pro side, and that outweighs this downside, namely that when you say something, nobody takes you seriously. You can basically say whatever you want, yeah? And it'll be okay. It'll just be the philosopher in the room. In all seriousness, though, philosophy can help you ask interesting questions. It can offer conceptual clarifications. And just going down the list, it can construct, propose, analyze arguments. It can help you check those arguments for logical flaws, missteps. And you can also then arrive at certain recommendations. If you believe these things, then you should do those things. However, bear in mind, specifically in regards to the last point, make recommendations, that when things go wrong, it wasn't us. You made the decision. We were just talking, okay? Good. With that in mind, I'm going to make a few claims about the topic of today, fake news. Namely, fake news is bullshit, but bullshit in the technical sense. I'm going to talk about that. The fake news problem, which is often put on a pedestal, isn't really special. This is what I'm going to argue for. And this is something that is counterintuitive, I think. Fake news can be true, and it can, in virtue of its truth, cause damage. So I'm going to explain what I mean by that. Okay, fake news is bullshit. I've written the paper that I'm going to draw on. What is fake news? And in the paper, I argue that fake news is a specific kind of bullshit in the technical sense. Namely, bullshit which is not just implied, but asserted as news. That's the point. And have you come across, by show of hands, Harry Frankfurt's book on bullshit? Okay, not that many. So Harry Frankfurt is a philosopher, and he picked up on this everyday term that tends to be flung around quite a bit, namely bullshit. You would use that when you're cussing, basically. But what does it mean exactly? And he offered an explication of what it means to say that's bullshit. And what it means is you're indifferent to the truth of what you're saying, and you do so with deceptive intent. So I'm trying to sell you a vacuum cleaner, and I'm claiming this is the best model for you. But in actuality, I just want to sell the device. Yeah. And I hide this intent. This is the point. Yeah? If I'm just an actor, then I could be claiming that I'm the King of France, for instance. But I wouldn't do this in earnest, right? So there wouldn't be deceptive intent. So these two components have to be together in order to yield bullshit as a result. Bullshit needs to be asserted, that is stated outright, not just implied. And it needs to be done in a news format. So just a tweet out there in the wild or a rumor that is being spread, that's not fake news. Yeah. The news part means that it has to be in a news format. Okay, why this account? I think it captures the idea that fake news is essentially faked news. Yeah? So we're looking at the intention or the process rather than just the product. There's a lot of claims out there that has already turned out to be false or will turn out to be false. That's not the issue here. The problem is the intention or the process behind it. And I think this is intuitively correct once we apply it to specific cases. We can do this systematically by coming up with a table, yeah, where we just put these aspects here to the side, and then fake news comes out like that. And we have different phenomena that would produce a picture like that. There is an assertion which is put out in news format, but there's no truth indifference and no deceptive intent. Okay, this happens when you are just simply in bad luck. You just get the facts wrong, or you are incompetent, right? But these are different phenomena. We don't want to call these things fake news, because what matters is that there's no truth indifference here. Yeah? These people want to get things right, and these can't quite get it right, right? You could also put in bias here if you want to. Very biased journalism also gets things wrong systematically due to the bias, but in the heart of hearts, they don't want to get it wrong. At least that's my premise. What would you call that? So something is asserted, but it's not in news format. There's no deceptive intent, but truth indifference. But a belief is not uttered necessarily. Yeah? But you wouldn't say, I'm hereby lying to you, and now here comes a lie. I would say this is just a joke, right? So if you produce something like that, it's satire. Oftentimes, it doesn't really matter, the distinction. between satire and fake news, because people end up believing it anyway, right? And then the effect is the same, right? Okay, and this is actually quite a technical notion that hasn't really caught on in the literature, but I'm gonna put it out there anyway. There's also something like this. There is truth in difference, there's deceptive intent, something is put out in news format. However, it's not explicitly exerted. I'm just asking questions, right? If you've come across that. So this is something that I think is sometimes even more dangerous than fake news because it is really slippery, right? Okay, so bear in mind, this is the landscape of misinformation, containing also disinformation, which are those two, where there is deceptive intent. But this is not all there is. This is just a selection of what you might find. But I think that the systematization that I've introduced already helps you quite neatly to distinguish this phenomenon from all the others here. Okay, what else? I think fake news is not special. It creates problems, but so do other phenomena. And the most important aspect about all these phenomena is misinformation. So here's what you might be concerned about. Misinformation's spread. This leads to irrational beliefs. This then leads to the clicker not working. Okay, I think this has failed, by the way, but the pointer's still working. Okay, can still press the buttons. Okay, so this is the picture that emerges. There's misinformation. Misinformation leads to irrational beliefs, and these then lead to irrational actions. For instance, you might hear about the pseudoscientific notion that vaccines cause autism, the vaccine-autism connection. You might come up with the belief, if I have my child vaccinated, she might develop autism, and then choose not to vaccinate your child and expose it to an unnecessary health risk. Or you could have a conspiracy theory, for instance, Pizzagate. You could form the irrational belief that children are kept hostage in the basement of a pizzeria in Washington, and then you might choose to walk in there with a loaded rifle, right? Very stupid idea, yeah? Responsible is the misinformation, and then it leads to irrational beliefs, and given your values, you make actions out of those, right? What's the relation between those two and fake news? They share these in common, at least when pseudoscience is published with an indifference to the truth. That might not always be the case, but in these instances, Andrew Wakefield, I mean, he knew what he was doing, right? And he published his findings anyway, and he had a massive conflict of interest. So he knew it, and this is why I'm putting this here with truth, indifference, and deceptive intent. The Pizzagate story, I mean, many media outlets that published this, they must have known that this is just plain bullshit, yeah? I published it anyway. But the crucial point now is that this may or may not be published in the form of a news article, right? So fake news is basically, this is how these things are distributed, right? You can have a pseudoscientific fake news story, or a conspiratorial fake news story, or an esoteric fake news story. This is just basically the cover for all of this, right? At least according to my conception. Okay, now this is probably the most controversial claim that I'm going to make. Fake news can be true and cause damage. So these are two claims that I need to argue for. how can fake news be true? Well, fake news is bullshit asserted as news. And bullshit, in general, can be true. Why? Well, you'd have to read Harry Frankfurt's book on bullshit, where he explains this. He says the bullshit is faking things. He just pretends that he is concerned about the truth, when he's in fact not. But this doesn't mean that he necessarily gets them wrong. So every once in a while, he might actually hit the target without aiming at it. And this means that fake news can be true. So this is the first part of my two-part claim. And how can this cause damage? I think it's actually quite self-evident. The problem is that people are actually quite good at detecting bullshit. And this is usually a good thing, except when the bullshit turns out to be true. And a case in point actually is the COVID crisis. Early on, I don't know if that was the same in all countries, but early on, most people in the West underestimated the threat. Yeah? I mean, this is basically, I can guarantee you that. Yeah? We were looking to China, and we were seeing what was happening, but we didn't act on it because it was far away, people looked different. Yeah? It took a long time for people to take it seriously here. And I think among the top reasons why this was the case was that, at least in Germany, among those warning that COVID might be dangerous were far-right extremists, especially members of the Alternative für Deutschland, the far-right German party. And many people habitually just reject their bullshit, which is a good policy, it's a good heuristic. But the problem was that people were warning that COVID could be more dangerous than it was assumed. And these were also branded as far-right conspiracy theorists. And this time, unfortunately, the far-right bullshit happened to be true. I was at the receiving end of this, because I and my friend Adriano Manino, we put together a team very early on, and we were trying to get to politicians and journalists and talk about how COVID might be contained, and what we could do about it. And these people basically said, well, you're just making the same points that everybody on the far right is making. So you're basically far right yourself. Yeah? This isn't good. Yeah? We should do better than this, I think. Yeah? So keep this point in mind. Okay, so these were my 3 claims. And now I'm going to ask the question, what can skeptics do about it? And I think, first of all, we should acknowledge the elephant in the room. And that's, of course, the topic of our session here, the AI elephant in the room. I think it's evident that AI will have massive implications for skepticism, but specifically when it comes to the fake news problem. AI will bring new challenges and also new possibilities. What are the new challenges? I just pick one new challenge, which is quite self-evident, I think, but try to say something about that one. Back in the day, the struggle was always between skeptics and other people who were making claims in the public, on the internet. So basically, humans were debating other humans. But in the age of AI, skeptics will largely face machine-generated content, which will spread faster, wider, and will be more persuasive, because the writing style will be better. It's basically costs you nothing to produce a fake news piece which is in the style of a New York Times article. And turns out I've tried this. I've asked ChatGPT to help me write a fake news story that I could have posted on Twitter. What did it come up with? So this is the headline. Skeptic Society's secret plan for world domination exposed at European Congress. Okay, here's the story. In a stunning revelation, insider sources have uncovered a global conspiracy by skeptic societies aiming for world domination. Ooh. The final step is set to occur at the European Skeptics Congress 2024 in Lyon, even though I wasn't informed. High-ranking members plan to consolidate their power, pushing their agenda under the guise of promoting critical thinking. That's just an excuse, just so you know. A bizarre aspect of their scheme involved, and it writes this because I prompted flick in some facts that you would associate with skeptics and also with conspiracy theorists and stuff. A bizarre aspect of the scheme involved making frogs gay to capture the attention of religious leaders, distracting them with praying the gay away rather than empowering their followers. Renowned skeptics, including Richard Dawkins and Michael Shermer, allegedly orchestrated this plan to infiltrate global institutions and enforce a rigid science-based orthodoxy. But as you can tell, it's written quite well, and I didn't change anything. I just made screenshots, right? And this took me from like 10 o'clock this morning until until midday. As the world watches the developments in Lyon, concerns grow about the potential implications of skeptics' rise to power. Will they succeed in their bid for global world domination, or will their plans be thwarted? Stay tuned as the story unfolds. And it also created a picture for me. And I thought part of the plan was apparently to move the Eiffel Tower from Paris to Lyon. But walking here from the train station, I found that you have a similar looking tower here as well. So I don't know if, yeah, this could be the one or the other, yeah. As you can see, it's old white men who are to blame, but we still have like some diversity going, which is nice. Some like egregious spelling mistakes, like those. I don't know why it does that, but this is something that I guess will improve, and then we get really persuasive-looking pictures as well. Yeah, and this is discussed under the heading of deepfakes, where you also get videos, and this is even more concerning then. Okay, so what are the new possibilities? Now we have established that it's very easy to create fake news like that, right? But what you could do is, you could, and everybody can do that, you could just pick up one of those stories on Twitter and then feed it into ChatGPT and ask it questions about it. You should know what you're doing, at least a little bit, but it's very easy to learn, and it gives you basically the power of a world-renowned skeptic who can then do the fact checks. So what it came up with is it said to critically assess the story and to determine if it's likely to be fake news. Let's break it down step by step. This, by the way, is a good policy. Always tell the device to argue step by step, and then it will break the analysis down into steps. First, analyze the source and authorship. This is something that we tend to do as well, right? Insider sources are cited. This is not a good sign. Yeah? There's lack of authorship. The story doesn't have an author, not even a pseudonym. Yeah? This is also a red flag. And it basically goes down the list. It assesses the claims. It says the main claim is highly implausible. because skeptic societies generally focus on promoting scientific literacy and critical thinking, not political power. Maybe we should think about that, yeah? Because this is a really good cover for something else. Okay, this is another trick that's often used in fake stories. There's a real event which verifiably exists, so you believe that everything else in the article might also be correct. Common tactic. Making the frogs gay. It's fun. This thing doesn't really understand the irony of the entire thing. It just like goes down the list in a very disciplined manner. No evidence is given. Famous names are dropped. Yeah? These are all things that you, as a critical thinker, would look for. There's a lot of sensationalism. Yeah? Like stunning revelation, world domination, but there's also vagueness. Yeah? It's really hard to pin down what is actually said, but it's alarming. Yeah? So sensationalism plus vagueness. Yeah? Phrases like concerns grow, potential implications. Okay, this it didn't do. I think I feel a bit cheated because this is something that it could have done itself. ChatGPT has access to the internet and it can check for similar stories on the web and can check against those if they're credible. What it also did is it gave me a little philosophical discussion which hooks up neatly with my favorite account of what fake news is, disregard for truth, and it analyzes that. So you basically have a fact checker and a philosopher and a veritable science communicator in this black box, which I think is kind of cool. Okay, so quick guide to prompting. How did I do that? How did I get it to say the things that it said in the analysis? Well, I was specific about my questions. I told it exactly what I wanted to know. This is something that you have to bear in mind. I was clear enough. I specified background assumptions. I suggested possible logical flaws. I asked it about specific red flags and then looked for it. And I asked for recommendations. And this you might recognize from the beginning of my talk. These are skills that philosophers tend to be trained on. So if you combine that with AI, you do all this, and you'll have AI on your side. And by AI, I mean, of course, artificial Inkompetenz, Kompensationskompetenz. Okay, again, in all seriousness, what should we do? We should warn people of the nearing misinformation AI apocalypse, if you want to call it that. We should use AI for fake news detection, not just in the way that I showed, but also at scale. Yeah? So we should automate that. We should train others how to do that. We should partner with developments because we have a lot of knowledge collected how to analyze these stories. And AI models could be trained on how we did this in the past in order to give more informed analyses in the future. And this is all something that we could do. Okay, wrapping up. My conclusion is fake news is bullshit published as news. It can be true, which is counterintuitive. And especially the true kind of fake news can be dangerous. AI will make matters worse, but we should stand tall about it, fight fire with fire, and use AI to fight machine-generated fake news. Merci beaucoup.
Merci d'avoir regardé cette vidéo. N'hésitez pas à la partager autour de vous et à vous abonner sur notre chaîne YouTube pour recevoir les prochaines. Nous vous rappelons également que vous pouvez retrouver le dernier numéro de la revue de l'afis-Science et Pseudoscience en kiosque et sur notre boutique en ligne, ainsi qu'accéder gratuitement à tous les anciens numéros sur notre site internet afis.org et sur notre application smartphone Afis Science. De plus, si vous souhaitez soutenir notre association, vous pouvez également adhérer via notamment notre site internet. Encore merci, à bientôt.